When it comes to quality sleep, Ashley has you covered with top mattress brands at winning prices and with special financing options available. You can snooze now and pay later. Plus, your mattress purchase helps give the gift of better sleep to children in need and U.S. Special Operations Forces. Visit your local Ashley store or shop online today and make every snooze count. Financing is subject to credit approval. See store or ashley.com for details.
At Consumer Cellular, you get the same exact coverage as the largest carriers, but for up to half the cost. Same thing, up to half the cost. Up to half the cost for the same thing. 50% the money for 100% the same thing. I hope I'm making myself clear. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Half the cost savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single-line 5GB data plan with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single-line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plan offered by T-Mobile and Verizon May 2023.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is the man that will be joining me for lunch after the show. So, food, be afraid. He is the captain.
Thank you. It's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
This week, we are very happy to be featuring Half and Half Lemonade Iced Tea IPA by the brilliant folks over at Evil Twin Brewing Company. This is like a summer shandy, but with more alcohol, so yum. And I love a good Arnold Palmer anyway, so this was a must-try for me, and it's earned its own space in prime refrigerator real estate over at my house. Garage grade 3 3/4 bottle caps out of 5. And here's some cheers to our good friends for helping us out this week. First up, big cheers and thanks to James G. in Flossmoor, Illinois.
And a big shout out to Christine in Cleveland.
Next, a big thank you to Tammy in Washington State.
And a big shout out to John K. in Parts Unknown, but also John K., make sure you return your library books.
Here we have a cheers to Norma in Marietta, Georgia. And last but certainly not least, we have Alex in Matthews, North Carolina. Everyone we just mentioned went to our website, truecrimegarage.com, and they clicked on that little donate to the beer fund button. And for that, we thank you.
Beer fund for the beer run, BWRUN, beer run. And for all of our old episodes, download the Stitcher app. It's free. And we also have a bonus show called Off the Record. Check that out if you haven't. And that is enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. Missing person. Jaliek Rainwalker. On Friday, November 2nd, 2007, 12-year-old Jaliek Rainwalker was reported missing from his grandparents' residence in Greenwich, Washington County, New York. Jaliek is biracial, with light brown hair and green eyes. At the time of his disappearance, Jaliek was 5 foot 6 inches tall, 105 pounds. He is believed to have been wearing blue jeans and black high-top sneakers. Foul play is suspected. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the New York State Major Crimes Unit at 518-783-3211 or email nysvicap@troopers.ny.gov. That's nysvicap@troopers.ny.gov. Jaliek Rainwalker was born on August 2nd, 1995 in Albany, New York, to a mother addicted to crack and alcohol. Jaliek was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, meaning he was exposed to addictive toxic substances in utero that impacted his development. Despite all of our digging, we have never located Jaliek's parents' names. Jaliek was a good-looking kid with green eyes and a big smile. There are a few photos of Jaliek available online, and if you look him up, you'll see a face beaming with personality. But unfortunately, due to Jaliek's parental situation, he was put up for adoption shortly after entering this world. From there, he was shuttled around from foster home to foster home, 6 in all, before Stephen Kerr and Jocelyn McDonald adopted him in 2003. Per the Albany Times-Union, Jaliek lived with the couple and their children for 5 years, including 3 years as their adopted son. Stephen and Jocelyn had 4 other children, 3 biological sons and 1 adopted daughter. The kids ranged in age from 8 years old up to 14. Jaliek also had 2 biological half-brothers who lived in Albany, New York, about 35 miles from the town of Greenwich, where Jaliek lived with his adoptive family in rural upstate New York. As described by our friends over at the Charlie Project, on Jaliek's case profile page, his adoptive family lived a non-traditional lifestyle. When they first took in Jaliek, the family lived about 15 minutes from the village of Greenwich in Washington County. Now, this house was really... The current house was really a back-to-nature type structure. There's no indoor plumbing, and the electricity, the only electricity that the house has, comes from a generator. And, it's just a one-bedroom house. So the family that sleeps together weeps together, I guess. It's easy to say that Jaliek's parents were the hippie types. They sold eggs at local farmers markets and preferred to leave little to no environmental impact. Jaliek was homeschooled by his adoptive parents, and some other local kids were schooled at Jaliek's home as well. Now, Jaliek had some behavioral problems. According to the Cambridge Greenwich police chief, the boy was diagnosed with a number of emotional and psychiatric problems because of his fetal alcohol syndrome and being shuffled around from 7 different families in his only 12 years of life. His life was not easy, of course. Misbehavior and lack of understanding of appropriate interaction was to be expected. But his issues resulted in emotional outbursts that could be violent. His adoptive parents stated later that he had rage-filled temper tantrums and that his siblings were afraid of him. His outbursts could last up to an hour. Jaliek was very intelligent. He was an avid reader. Before Jaliek was adopted, he lived with the Schoen family, and they did plan to adopt him. But But after he attacked their daughters when he was 7 years old, they decided he could no longer stay in their home. This is when he went to live with Stephen and Jocelyn. Several of the other foster families who had taken in Jaliek temporarily over the years said that he was a loving child, but his outbursts were too disruptive for them to feel comfortable offering him a permanent home. This is just a difficult situation. And it's a sad reality that we have this kid who is brought into this world, and he's brought into this world a victim immediately.
Yeah.
And he's given up for adoption. And to be honest with you, Captain, I thank God that those parents, the woman was at least smart enough to give him up for adoption. As rough as that sounds, it doesn't sound like she had the skill set or resources to raise a child.
Well, and like you said, I mean, you have trauma happening to you since birth.
Right. And then you're being shuffled around, and then you have this situation where people, good people, are attempting to do a good thing. Bring this child into their home. Try to raise them as their own, but because of his issues, it becomes an unbearable situation where now your children might be afraid of this kid who seems to be a great kid, smart kid, loving child, but at times he's got these outbursts that are violent and at times scary.
Yeah, you want to help the kid, but you don't want to put your kid in danger as well.
So that's a little background on the events that were leading up to the disappearance of Jaliek.
Well, let's go over this house really quick, because, I mean, that's a very odd situation.
I didn't get into it because I just assumed everybody lived that way.
It's almost like they lived in like a hunting cabin, like something that would be okay for the weekend. We're going to go up there. Yeah, there's no electricity, but we have a generator. We're going to spend some time outdoors. That doesn't seem that bad. It seems like a far removed reality compared to how people are living currently.
7 people sleeping in one room, too.
I don't know how ethical that is, especially when you have a kid you're trying to adopt. It just seems a little funny to me.
That's the thing. It's difficult to talk about it here. Imagine living in that situation.
Yeah.
And the younger kids probably don't know much different. Now, at the end of October 2007, 12-year-old Jaliek had a few rough days. According to Stephen and Jocelyn, Jaliek threatened another young boy who was in his homeschool class at their house. It's reported the boy was only about 5 years old. According to Jocelyn and Stephen, Jaliek said some pretty horrible things to this kid along the lines of a violent sexual assault he intended to perpetrate on him. Now, it's important to bear in mind that we are hearing all of this information about this incident secondhand.
He's just a kid himself, so where is he hearing this stuff in order to be able to make those type of threats to somebody else?
If, in fact, this went down the way they said it went down.
Correct.
Because Jaliek was homeschooled and the family was somewhat isolated from society, there is not really any way to verify whether their depiction of this incident is accurate at all.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just like you said, a simple choice. This is a family that wants to live this way, and sometimes it's a choice to be isolated because you don't want people to know what's going on behind closed doors.
Regardless of what went down, they're going to say this is what went down, and according to them, this incident was the last straw. Jocelyn had become afraid of the boy, she says. According to the Charlie Project, on October 23rd, Stephen called a crisis hotline and reported Jaliek to be unmanageable. Around the same time, Jocelyn and Stephen began inquiring of child services personnel how to reverse the adoption. They were informed that a legal adoption is binding and cannot be undone. Jaliek was theirs to keep. They were recommended respite care services. Respite care services is temporary institutional care of a sick, elderly, or disabled person, providing relief for their usual caregiver. In other words, short-term relief with a little separation time between, in this situation, parents, and Jaliek. They decided to make use of this resource. This was not the first time that they did, though.
Right.
The plan was for Elaine and Tom Person to keep Jaliek at their home for a few days. After that, he would be sent to another respite home. The Persons, who had housed Jaliek in the past, kept him at their home until November 1st. On the evening of Thursday, November 1st, Stephen picked Jaliek up from the Persons' home near Albany. Father and son went to a Red Robin restaurant to get some dinner. Then, instead of returning to the family home in Greenwich, Stephen and Jaliek headed to Stephen's parents' house at 11 Hill Street in a different part of Greenwich. This house was unoccupied at the time, as Stephen's father was a State Department diplomat stationed in Romania, and Stephen's mother was there with him as well. At the house, Stephen later told police the two spent the night, but in the morning, he went into the room Jaliek slept in and found that the bed was stuffed with pillows, the way that kids do when they want it to look like someone was sleeping in that bed. Jaliek was not there. At 7:30 a.m., Stephen found a note, and then he called the Cambridge Greenwich police at 8:57 a.m. All right, just side note here, make sure you're paying attention. At 7:30 a.m., Stephen found a note. He calls the police at 8:57 a.m. This note was handed over to the police. It was in Jaliek's handwriting, and it said, "Dear everybody, I am sorry for everything. I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye, Jaliek." Now, not on the same note, but on a separate sheet of paper, there was a word, Albany. Later, people suspect that this could be important. Now, the story of the parents of Jocelyn and Stephen, they were saying, hey, Jaliek clearly ran away. He had gotten in big trouble with them and clearly felt horrible about it. The adoptive family sat down with police to discuss their child.
Well, and when this family is supposed to be your forever home, and now they're trying to give you back after 7 houses you've already lived in, this could be cause of, well, they don't even want me. They don't want to try to work with me on any of the issues that I have. And now they're bouncing me back around. I don't want to keep doing this. So it gives a very plausible reason of why he would want to just leave the situation.
Stephen and Jocelyn told Chief Bell and his officers that their son was very troubled, and he was both suicidal and homicidal at the time of his disappearance. But, they said, they had not attempted to provide him with any counseling or medications for this. It's unclear whether they just did not believe in medical intervention or if they were exaggerating Jaliek's condition. Stephen and Jocelyn tried to come up with some possible destinations where Jaliek might have run off to. They informed the Cambridge Greenwich PD about Jaliek's brothers, his half-brothers, in Albany. That makes sense. He's been there before. Maybe he wanted to seek them out or take up residence with them if possible.
Right.
He's 12 years old. You know, when you're 12, especially when you've been bounced around from a few different houses, you might feel that it's not that difficult to just pick up roots and start elsewhere. Jocelyn said perhaps Jaliek hitched a ride somewhere, maybe like New York City, because that was somewhere that Jaliek had always wanted to go. Now, according to Stephen, Jaliek had befriended some older teen boys while at the Parsons home, and he said, well, maybe he ran off with them. Or they suggested that Jaliek was interested in his heritage and maybe he wanted to live with an African-American family. Well, we have a missing 12-year-old boy, and thus the search begins. The police took this case very seriously from the beginning, and that is obvious. Police Chief Bell sent out officers to canvass the area. Quote, if he got out onto a main road, somebody would have seen something, Chief Bell said. and working on the assumption that the child had gotten lost or, God forbid, harmed himself, they pulled out all of the stops. Police and other agencies searched a 5-mile radius of the Kerr's home where Jaliek was last seen by his adoptive father. They used infrared cameras, helicopters, canines, divers, and even drained a pond in their aerial, land, and water searches for the missing boy. Forest rangers joined in to help scour the dense wooded areas. Tips were called in from around the nation about supposed sightings. These were checked and run down. Police investigated more than 200 leads in the first few days. Because this was not Chief Bell's first rodeo, both the family's house and where they actually lived and Stephen's father's house were both searched immediately. When they didn't find Jaliek in the first couple of days, things began to look worrisome. November in upstate New York has very cold nights. Jocelyn and Stephen were able to describe what they believed Jaliek to be wearing at the time that he went missing. A yellow fleece jacket, a t-shirt with a dragon on it, jeans, and black high tops. Police could not totally rule out suicide or running away, but since not a trace of Jaliek turned up in any of the searches, things were looking dire. Chief Bell told reporters on November 12th, if he ran away, he would have turned up by now, and we just don't have a runaway kid here.
Yeah, I mean, he's 12 years old, so it's not like he has the resources to just go start a new life, even though maybe he wanted to because of all the problems I think he was having. But he's also 12 years old, so we can assume he's a little, as far as street smarts go, a little naive and becomes a likely victim.
Yeah, I mean, he could have taken off. He's a child. The children are impulsive, and he is making irrational decisions or choices or the ability to not make good choices when he is throwing fits. So he may just be reacting to stuff going on and may have made some bad choices. Now, the adoptive parents in the family, they tried to pull the community together as one would expect immediately after the kid went missing. They spent weeks putting up flyers, and Jocelyn implored residents to post Jaliek's missing flyer and keep an eye out for the boy. They held prayer vigils. They hired a psychic. They offered a cash reward. But pretty quickly, it became apparent that their public facade was not the same as their private behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Something's wrong here, Police Chief George Bell said to the newspapers. He said, in 30 years of experience, a kid of 12 years old, and he says, I don't care what his mindset is, he doesn't fall off the face of the world. And Chief Bell came right out and stated that Stephen and Jocelyn were not acting the way other concerned, distraught parents acted in his experience. They didn't set up shop at the police station, demanding action and answers. Now, Stephen claims to have called the police station 78 times, but Chief Bell disputes this.
Right.
He pointed out that Stephen and his wife agreed to be interviewed only with an attorney, and Stephen did not agree to be polygraphed on the advice of his attorney.
Yeah, which we see that happen often, but you'd think they'd do a thorough search of the house.
Yeah, there's some debate on how thorough the search of the houses were, because what's going to happen is that's really, you're doing like a cursory search at that point in your investigation. You're really just going in there and looking for the boy himself.
Right.
A lot of times kids are just hiding somewhere. There's an amazing amount of calls where it's a missing persons case, little kid, especially the younger they are, they're often found in the home.
Right.
So you're just looking through these houses for this young boy himself, and that makes you move from room to room rather quickly. You're not really there looking for evidence of what could have happened to the boy unless things are obvious, any obvious signs. So later you're going to have the parents say, hey, We submitted to these searches on both of these properties very early on. Later, the police are going to have a different version of that, saying these were just cursory searches. We didn't really get into any detailed searches of the home. And when we tried to go back, they said, no, we don't want you here. Now, Jocelyn, on the other hand, did agree to be polygraphed. And I couldn't find the results of that, but my guess is... What?
There's just a lot of things with these individuals that don't make a lot of sense. Like the lawyer told the husband not to take a polygraph test, but it's okay for the wife to take one. It's just seems very strange.
I don't know, could not find the results of that test, but I'm thinking that they didn't gain anything to further fuel their suspicions from that polygraph test.
Right.
The husband's refusal to cooperate, and it goes beyond there are people out there going right now, well, who cares he didn't agree to the polygraph test? It wasn't just that. It was other forms of not cooperating, not answering basic questions, not being willing to sit down without an attorney present, and
not setting up information center at the police department.
Setting up shop. I mean, some people will hunker down at the police station to keep an eye on what's going on and be fully aware and be the first to know what's going on with their child. That didn't happen here. So these things are setting off some alarm bells to some people out there. And as there were also hints that Stephen Kerr had a problem with his own temper and had flown off the handle at Jaliek in the past. One story Chief Bell learned from Jocelyn's mother, Jaliek's grandmother, Barbara Reilly, who heard it straight from her daughter, was of a situation when Jaliek was 9 years old and he was continually making some noise by like drumming his fingers or hands on the table, even though Stephen repeatedly asked him to stop. At some point, as the story goes, Stephen lost it and grabbed the boy, dragged him down to the creek near the home, and was holding his head underwater. This until the wife intervened.
Right, that's called attempted murder.
Stephen and Jocelyn hired an attorney right from Jump Street. They got a bulldog at a big local firm named Jeffrey McMorris. This lawyer said publicly that the Cambridge, Greenwich police and state police were treating Stephen as a suspect and clearly embraced the idea that he had done something to Jaliek rather than investigating if the boy ran away. McMorris requested that the FBI take over the investigation. Articles show that the FBI became involved in the case of missing Jaliek Rainwalker by the end of November. And while Stephen and Jocelyn stopped cooperating with police and refused to participate in searches for their son in early December, they appeared in an exclusive interview with Anya Tucker of TV 10 Albany, in which they refused to answer most of the questions, instead declaring how much they were doing to find Jaliek and were preparing for when he returns to their home. And then there was this. On December 20th, an article in the Albany Times-Union states, Stephen Kerr, the last person to see Jaliek Rainwalker, his adopted son, before the boy disappeared November 1st, has been seen around Greenwich and Cambridge tearing down flyers, advertising a vigil for the missing boy. Police Chief Bell says he receives several calls a day from people who are angered and perplexed by Kerr's behavior. Police sources and multiple eyewitnesses told the newspaper they saw Stephen removing the signs. Apparently, Stephen said that he wanted the flyers gone because the event they were promoting was organized by people who were slandering him. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you look forward to the holidays? Maybe you struggle with seasonal blues. This time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or even anxiety about it. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot, something to look forward to make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Visit Angie.com. You can do this when you Angie that.
All right, we're back.
Cheers to you, Captain. Cheers to all the people out there, especially the people in the back. I want to make sure that I point out that
The cheap seats.
we
Hey, up
rely
there.
on. Hey, those are the best seats.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that fought to get in.
What did John Lennon used to say? He'd say that people in the cheap seats clap your hands, and the people up front just jiggle your jewelry.
Well, I want to point out, Captain, that we relied on the excellent coverage of this case for our coverage of this case by the Post-Star newspaper articles by Don Lehman, as well as the excellent coverage by the Albany Times-Union. Wanted to put that in there before we got too far.
Right, let's try to make sense of this. So it's the adopted father. So
Stephen, yeah.
yeah, but to go around and to pull down flyers, it makes zero sense to me. I don't care what they're saying about you. By having that flyer up there, it's bringing attention to the fact that your adopted son is missing. The whole point of anything is to find him safe or find out what happened to him. And by ripping down these flyers and not talking to police and not doing certain things, it's almost like you're stepping away. And we know with a lot of these missing person cases, you need the story to be as loud as possible so you can get as much of a spotlight on the case.
Right, and there are people out there that will argue, hey, this was not technically missing persons flyers. These were flyers advertising the prayer vigil or the candlelight vigil for this missing boy. But you're spot on, Captain. Any publicity is good publicity at this point.
Right.
And you would also think that your headspace would be so far gone from worrying about anything other than finding the boy, right? Like, wouldn't that just be consuming you at the time? Like, you don't need that sweet taste of vindication of ripping down flyers to get even with these people that you think are bad-mouthing you. You'd be too concerned about finding your son. But if this is true, then maybe this is a check mark that is verification of this dude not being able to control his behavior and reaction to things.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's a shit stain. But I also, like, we go back to that house. You have an adopted son and you were saying an adopted daughter, correct?
Correct.
And then biological kids. And they're all sharing one room. They're all sleeping in one room. And this has happened several times where we have these sick individuals that will adopt children and they abuse them. And I think there's some kind of law against some of these things. I know in certain states that if you, let's say you get remarried, your stepdaughter can't share a room with your biological son. Certain things like that they have to, if they're not blood relative, that they can't share a room. I know that's a law in several states. You'd think that would apply also to people that are going through adoptions. But it seems like they got these adoptions to go through, and then they just said, well, we'll do whatever we want. We'll live however we want. This just seems like a very dark situation that should have been investigated before the kid even went missing.
If anybody knew to investigate it. So, to me, it's really pretty cut and dry, right? It's either a situation of this is a family making do the best they can. I mean, look, some people are forced to live in their cars for months at a time.
Right.
But either this is a situation where a family's just trying to make do and squeak by, or you're right, maybe there's something weird going on here, or it's just somebody milking the system.
Yeah, or a little bit of both. I mean, but I think the thing is most people that can't help themselves or can't help their family, they don't look into the idea of adopting more children. That's more mouths to feed. That's more bodies to house. What's the advantage?
I get what you're saying, but we got to keep in mind he was with them for 5 years, so their situation
could have changed.
When he was 12 could be much different than when he was 7.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have here now is the boy still missing, Jaliek still missing, and now we got this added threat of the cold weather and possibly snowy winter weather is on the way. Volunteers continue to go out looking for Jaliek, but nothing was found. And then Stephen Kerr looks like he was feeling the heat a little bit. He told the Times-Union, claiming to be completely cooperative, by the way, he said he opened his bank and phone records to police and let them search the 2 homes that he had access to. We touched on this a little bit before. He said, quote, "I've done everything. All they want to do is string me up and hang me, but they don't have any evidence." But Chief Bell said Stephen wouldn't even put his fingerprints on the door of the police station. He said he used his elbows to open the door at the police station in Cambridge when he came in to bring in some information. Bell is on record stating, "I mean, this whole thing is weird," end quote.
Yeah, look, you just get that feeling, and especially as police officers or law enforcement officers, they're around this stuff often. I mean, to me, it feels a lot pedo-like and child abuse. That's my gut feeling.
So what did the investigators uncover about Stephen Kerr that clearly convinced them that he knew more than what he was saying? Well, on the morning that he reported Jaliek missing, he told them that he found the goodbye note, as I'm calling it, from his son at 7:30 a.m. when he woke up. But as we pointed out earlier, he didn't call the police until 8:57 a.m. What did he do during the hour and a half between finding the note and calling the police? He took a shower and he returned some rented movies. Be kind, rewind. He did admit this to Chief Bell. In all fairness, he wasn't like hiding this information.
Well, in all fairness, you get charged for the late fee. That's important.
Yeah, but I do think it's important to point out he wasn't hiding. They didn't have to dig this up.
Right.
But it does seem weird. An hour and a half goes by before you report him missing. And there's more.
Well, no, the reporting the kid missing like an hour and a half later, not a big deal to me. If you're looking for the kid, if you're calling around, if you're doing some work, they're not necessarily, you got a 12-year-old boy, right? This is of age where you could go to the store and let him stay behind and maybe babysit some of the kids. So when you see this note that your 12-year-old adopted son is missing, you go, well, let me look around real quick. Let me go to some spot that I know he hangs out at.
Let me take a shower and return some movies.
Right, but let me call some of his friends. If you told me he did all those things and then he called the cops, I'd go, okay, that makes sense. But taking a shower and returning some movies, it's ridiculous.
Well, I in full disclosure, Captain, I'm with you. The note by itself doesn't alarm me to the point of immediate panic. But when you compound that with, I found his bed stuffed with pillows to make it look like somebody was sleeping in it, and I'm trying to reverse, I'm a week away from trying to have reversed this adoption.
Yeah, that's weird.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff going on. So the other thing too is that the police did have to uncover this. They uncovered video surveillance camera footage of a Chrysler Town and Country van that Chief Bell stated on the record was exactly like the gold one owned by Stephen's father. Remember the night that Jaliek went missing, or the morning, however you want to look at it, that he went missing, he and Stephen were at Stephen's parents' home, just the two of them. And this van that they found on the surveillance camera footage, it was seen driving by the Glens Falls National Bank branch on Main Street in Greenwich at 12:16 a.m. on November 2nd. That's the night that Jaliek vanished.
Right.
Stephen told investigators that he was asleep at his father's house at that time of night.
Liar.
Well, they've never been able to confirm that it was, in fact, the same van, but it looks identical according to the police chief.
Right.
Investigators stated that Stephen refused to allow them to inspect the minivan to compare it to the one seen on the video.
Of course he did.
Further, Chief Bell subpoenaed Stephen's cell phone records, and they showed some inconsistencies with what Stephen Kerr told police about that night. His cell phone history showed that on the night of November 1st, after he and Jaliek left the Red Robin, Stephen took a different route to the Hill Street house than he had claimed. Chief Bell said, "We know for a fact he has lied to us about that route because the cell phone records state he was nowhere near the route he told us he took home." There was also very little cell phone activity that has been reported for Stephen for that night in question. He had one call at 8:15 the night before, and then there was no other call until he called the police at 8:57 a.m. the morning when Stephen said he found the note.
I'd like to know if his phone was even on or in service, because with cell phone ping technology, maybe we would know where he went.
So what we have here, Captain, is about roughly 12 hours. What was Stephen doing? Either he was doing exactly what he told the police he was doing, but it doesn't seem that way.
Uh-huh.
He's at his parents' home with Jaliek, and they went to bed, and Stephen slept for the night, or was it more of what we have evidence of that's just not true? The story might just not be true. If that's the case, then we have hours.
Well, we know he's
when
a liar
he could have
now.
been covering something up or getting rid of something.
Well, but we're pretty clear on the fact that this guy's a liar. And if we think he's a liar, then law enforcement thinks he's a liar, and it's like, what else is he lying about?
Well, let's get into that 8:15 p.m. call. This was very shortly after Stephen and Jaliek finished eating dinner at the Red Robin. According to the Post-Star, this call was from a friend of Stephen's who later spoke to police. This is some weird stuff. He told them that on the phone, Stephen was agitated and angry, and Stephen made several rude comments about Jaliek. The caller's impression was that Jaliek was in the vehicle and could hear the insulting and derogatory things that Stephen was saying about the child. In January of 2008, it came out in the media that Stephen and Jocelyn were continuing to receive monthly stipend checks for $1,500.
Of course they were.
These were funds paid to adoptive families of challenged children by the Department of Social Services to help pay for their care. Of course, Jaliek had been gone for months by this point. All of this was enough to tip the scales, let's say. In a news conference on January 14th, 2008, police named Stephen Kerr as a person of interest in Jaliek's disappearance. This was based all on the information we just went through and the fact that he was the last person to see the child before Jaliek vanished. Meanwhile, at the other end of January 2008, there was a big development in this case. An anonymous letter sent to media around the region that claimed missing 12-year-old Jaliek Rainwalker was alive and was picked up on Route 40. This was being investigated by police. The Post-Star says they received the typewritten letter on Wednesday, as did at least 2 Albany television stations. But the contents of the letter are a lot more in-depth than that. The letter, which contained no return address and was postmarked Westchester, New York, reads, "Jaliek still alive. Needed a foot soldier for this war on drugs. Picked him up Route 40 post 30. He's okay. No fake. He says ask his mama and papa, who are the Macaroni family. My cat name Diamond. Yes. Why does Franti yell fire?" And then it says rapper ? I don't know what that means. "Don't try to look. We are not there." Clearly, this letter was designed to make it look like Jaliek was alive and maybe even well and living somewhere else.
With a crazy person?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, or who knows?
Or was it supposed to be some code for something?
There's no indication of who wrote it. I mean, your guess is as good as mine or anybody else's. I mean, did Jaliek write it? Did somebody write it on his behalf? Is somebody holding him somewhere against his will? Is he living there happily? It's a confusing letter.
Well, I'd really like to know if the initial letter that was supposedly written by Jaliek was actually written by Jaliek. And if that wasn't, then I would guess that this one isn't as well. And this is just to throw law enforcement off the scent.
Well, this was a typed letter. So again, it's the person, no return address. It's kind of cryptic. It's typed. There's whoever gave this to the media, they're clearly constructing the thing without the intention of you determining who authored this letter.
Right.
Now, Stephen and Jocelyn's lawyer, Jeffrey McMorris, jumped on this opportunity to say, "Hey, I told you so," right? Their lawyer said that the letter contained information that only Jaliek would have known. So that's got to be proof that he's still alive somewhere, right? And his clients, Stephen Kerr and Jocelyn McDonald, were excited. And they said that it was a sign that Rainwalker was still alive. And again, they're doing everything they can. This is what they're saying.
Right.
And not only are we doing everything we can, but we're also preparing for the boy to return. Now, this letter arrived.
Yeah, we're preparing for the boy to return when we're going to try to get rid of him anyways. And we keep taking the money. We keep taking money for him, even though he's not around. Even though we're probably the cause of him not being around, but we're going to keep taking money. So what shows you what kind of people these are.
Well, this letter arrived. It came about as the Kerr-McDonald clan was in the process of packing everything up to move to Vermont because Stephen felt that he was being persecuted by the police. In the meantime, as they prepared to leave, the family was staying at the Hill Street home of Stephen's parents, where Stephen and Jaliek spent the night, that last night that Jaliek was seen.
Yeah, well, you got to stay there so you can monitor it, so you can monitor if the police are searching that area.
But then you're also leaving the other place abandoned to not keep an eye on it. So
yeah, but if you're the one responsible for him going missing, you know which property is important and which one's not.
On February 7th, the Cambridge Greenwich police visited the family there. It seems as though this impromptu visit was deliberately intended to allow the police, to look around, scout out what was going on in the house. They saw a computer when they were there, and this is when they're like, uh-oh. They freeze the scene, and they sent someone out immediately to get a search warrant so they could confiscate the computer.
Yeah.
Chief Bell would not comment on whether they planned on searching the computer to see whether it had produced the anonymous letters about Jaliek being alive, but they want to search it for something, so we can assume that's probably what they're looking at, amongst other things. But according to the Post-Star newspaper, the letters were typed in a font and style that bore a, quote, strong resemblance to those used by Jocelyn in other correspondence to the media. Unfortunately, forensic examination of the letters themselves did not provide really any indication as to the source of the letter. As a result of this search, though, Jeffrey McMorris filed a notice of claim against the police department, naming Chief Bell specifically, alleging trespassing and false imprisonment. No lawsuit was ever filed and nothing was ever settled. It really looks like this captain was kind of a warning shot, from the attorney to the police department, telling them to back off.
Right.
Don't bully my clients.
Don't bully. Don't do your job. That's what he was trying to say. Don't do your job.
McMorris was dramatically indignant about all of these unwarranted infringements on his client's rights. He was constantly making statements like the police conduct was outrageous and calling Chief Bell the ringleader of the witch hunt against his clients. He continued to declare that the police were focusing on the wrong person, that Jaliek was out there somewhere, and that investigators were suffering from tunnel vision. I do want to get into a couple of people that, they seem to really, truly care about Jaliek. Let's talk about two women involved in this case who have principles and stood up for this unwanted child despite the personal cost of doing so. One is Elaine Person. She's the respite caregiver. She was an advocate for Jaliek from the beginning. She was, of course, aware of his behavioral issues, but as a respite caregiver, she was trained to deal with them and look past them to the person that the child truly was. She says, quote, Jaliek was a beautiful, sweet, intelligent, generous, and loving child with some behavior issues. According to Elaine, she and her husband and Jaliek had a nice 5 days together. And when Jaliek left her home with Stephen on that day, November 1st, she said he seemed happy. It certainly did not seem to her that Jaliek was planning to run away or harm himself. And remember, she said she did not believe that the boy knew that his adoptive parents were trying to give him back.
Right.
Besides just offering insight into Jaliek, Elaine had some important information for the investigators. She told them that during Jaliek's stay with them, she and her husband Tom observed Jaliek doing some homework assigned to him by his father. Remember, the kids were homeschooled.
Right.
And this homework assignment was to write a letter of apology to the other kids in his homeschool classroom who he had hurt by this recent outburst. Elaine said that she did not read the note written by Jaliek out of respect for his privacy, but she knew what it was and what purpose it was intended for. When she saw the news that Stephen Kerr was, she sees this on the news. Kerr is holding up this same note as evidence saying that Jaliek had left on his own volition. She's shocked. She yelled at the TV, that's not a goodbye note. That is a homework assignment. Now, we could give Stephen the benefit of the doubt and assume that he simply mistook this letter of apology for a departure note. But remember, Stephen was the one who assigned Jaliek to write the note in the first place. A really suspicious mind might even make the leap that Stephen had done so deliberately, planning to possibly later use the note to explain why Jaliek had vanished.
But it's almost like he put him in a situation, go here for a couple days. One, write this note for me. I'm going to use that against you, but I'm also going to use this time to figure out how I'm going to get rid of you.
I find the whole thing a little weird, and I question a lot of it. I understand Elaine's suspicions, but the way that the letter's written, the way it's constructed, does seem a little more goodbye-ish to me than apology, right? It says goodbye. It says, I won't bother you anymore. I guess you could take that really one of two ways, or
Right.
maybe even both.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Elaine made it her mission to find Jaliek. She took a leave of absence from her job and started a task force comprising of herself, her husband, Barbara Reilly, who's Jaliek's grandmother, and some of Jaliek's other foster families. They were calling themselves the Find Jaliek Task Force. They started a website publicizing Jaliek's disappearance. It became a bulletin board of sorts, listing all sorts of suspect behavior and past transgressions on the part of Jocelyn and Stephen. The website has been taken down since then, but we were able to find some excerpts from it. The website did not pull any punches. For example, Elaine wrote she believed Stephen harmed Jaliek and caused his disappearance. From a section titled What the Police Know, it's alleged that the family applied to adopt Jaliek and another child, basically in a bid to have access to the state-provided funds that accompanied such adoptions. And then after these adoptions went through, they moved to that inadequate housing situation with no plumbing or electricity.
Right.
It was said that Stephen and Jocelyn sent their own children to private school, but made Jaliek and the others make do with hand-me-downs, and they were homeschooled. Other posts on the website provided snippets showing what life was like there for Jaliek. One says, one time after a series of ignored reminders, Jaliek's mother banned him from using the outhouses for several days. Jaliek's only option was to either use the woods, this around the house, or try to wait it out until the family went on some errands so he could use, restrooms at these different businesses. Both Jaliek and Jocelyn told Jaliek's former foster parent that Jaliek was locked in his room at night. They saw the locks on the doors when they visited Jaliek. Jaliek's grandmother also confirmed that the locks were there and used. Jaliek's room also had no heat, according to this post, so the small portable heater was, I guess they put a small portable heater in the room at times, but would remove it, this to believed to be a form of punishment. Now, of course, we should make sure that we don't believe everything that we see on websites, especially websites like this. Others on social media have posted that Jocelyn had the kids' best interest at heart, and she was trying to protect Jaliek from her husband. Barbara Reilly is Jocelyn McDonald's mother and Jaliek's adoptive grandmother. Barbara told the media that in the 5 years Jaliek lived with her daughter's family, he exhibited instances of uncontrollable rages that were frightening to other family members. She also said that very quickly, very early on, she began to question the story that Jaliek ran away because she did not like the answers she was getting from the parents to her questions. This comes to light and gets into some good detail from a 2016 post by Barbara on the Facebook page she started for Jaliek. And chime in at any time here, Captain, if you need clarification on anything, because there are some names in this post that we have not yet introduced to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
She posted, 9 years ago today, Jaliek was last seen by the waitress and manager at Red Robin Restaurant in Latham, New York. Just after 8 p.m., Jaliek and Stephen left Red Robin in Stephen's parents' gold van. 12 hours later, my daughter, Jocelyn McDonald, called me saying Jaliek had run away in the night and she wanted me to drive to Greenwich. She says this was a hurried 45 miles to Stephen's parents' house where she found Stephen, Jocelyn, and Robin. Robin's one of the, is her grandson, in the family room of the house. Robin had just showered. Jocelyn was heading into the shower and Stephen was talking rapidly about finding a note and that he had gotten up early and looked in and seen what he thought was Jaliek in bed, and then he had gone to shower and have breakfast. Stephen was rambling and talking faster and faster about the respite home and the other foster children, and then returned to talk about his meal that he had the night before.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I asked questions about whether they'd reported Jaliek missing to the police and whether they'd gone to the neighborhood houses, searched the streets, whether the house and the garage and the van had been thoroughly searched, how Jaliek could have left the house, through which door. You know, she's asking all the normal questions. Whether there was any clothing or a jacket that might be missing. The answers were that there was only one way Jaliek could have left the house. Through the back door into the garage and then out the automatic door of the garage. She says, I asked about the noise of the garage opening and that there were extremely close neighbors that may have heard something. But the response was they didn't want to bother the neighbors with any questions.
Yeah.
The front door was locked from the inside with a key that was still in the hall cupboard. There was no missing jacket or clothing that they remembered being in the house. They hadn't gone to any neighbors or searched the streets. They hadn't searched the house except the bedroom Jaliek had supposedly slept in the previous night. There was no overwhelming sense of urgency or danger for Jaliek, she says. Indeed, she says Jocelyn was concerned because Bevan and Kiana, these are the other children, were in the homeschool and she needed to get them and take Robin to his doctor's appointment. She said that Stephen said he had an office birthday party to go to. After a half an hour, Stephen and Jocelyn decided we all needed to go to their house on Raven Way, and then she would get the kids together and then go to the son's doctor's appointment. She says that they all drove, but they took separate vehicles to the home. She said when she got into their house, Jocelyn was on the phone, on her cell phone, calling the homeschool family, and Stephen started circling around her, asking if she wanted breakfast and listing all of the things that he could cook for her. He was speaking rapidly, she says, and walking in circles. Now, once Jocelyn finished her phone call, she got Robin into his coat and was going to go pick up the other children, then go on to the doctor's appointment. Stephen said he was going to his work, to his boss's birthday party. She says she was stunned and said that she would drive around and look for Jaliek, which is how she spent November 2nd, 2007. 9 years ago today was the last time anyone other than Stephen Kerr saw Jaliek. 9 years of searching and investigating, still no definitive answer. Jaliek was a wonderful and loving child and deserves to be cared for and kept safe. She says, I feel we are in a holding pattern, but one day the final piece will be found and we'll know what happened to Jaliek and there will be justice. Our search for Jaliek will go on until there are answers. We love you, Jaliek. We miss you. Look, I wanted to go through that whole post there because it's important to note that she's pointing out that as soon as she was alerted to this missing child, as soon as she got involved, as soon as she's face to face with both mother and father, Neither of them seemed to be concerned that the boy was missing. Neither of them seemed to be looking for how the boy would have left the home, checking with the neighbors, looking on the streets. They didn't want to bother the neighbors. Mm-hmm. She's the one saying, hey, this is what we should be doing. This is what we should be investigating. We should be calling this in. We should be doing that. Meanwhile, adopted mom is worried about getting the other kid to the doctor's appointment, getting kids to school. The dad is worried about, oh, hey, sit down. I can cook you some breakfast. This is what I had for dinner last night. I have to go to my boss's birthday party. So a whole lot of, I mean, there's no sense of urgency. There's no effort being made at that time when she walks into this situation on behalf of the parents of Jaliek Rainwalker.
All right, thanks for joining us. So much more to get into tomorrow.
And we're going to be back here, so we want to see you in the garage tomorrow. Until then, be good, be kind, and don't litter.
Angie's List is now Angie, and we've heard a lot of theories about why.
I thought it was an eco move. Fewer words, less paper.
No, it was so you could say it faster.
No, it's to be more iconic.
Must be a tech thing.
But those aren't quite right. It's because now you can compare upfront prices, book a service instantly, and even get your project handled from start to finish.
Sounds easy.
It is, and it makes us so much more than just a list. Get started at Angie.com. That's ANGI, or download the app today.